very different.
Indeed, yes. The 1973 one is kind of interesting because it almost happens outside of time. I believe that right before that song is sung, Jesus is condemned to death and to drag the cross, and then all of a sudden you see Jesus in white, as if he's been resurrected or something.
He's literally transformed. It's a cut in scene.
Yeah. So it almost happens like, I don't know, in this strange other dimension. And then in the 2001, it's almost like Judas is from the future or something. Like he's, and it's really kind of the crux of the entire musical, I think, where he's asking all these questions like, why didn't you do it this way? Why didn't you, why are you doing this in 4 BC when there's no mass communication and there's no way to get out your message? And did you really mean to die in this horrible, terrible way? Was that intentional? Are you really who you say you are? And the 2001 is kind of interesting too, because there's a moment where Judas kind of waves a Bible in Jesus' face, and Jesus is like really interested. He wants to read it. He's reaching out for it. And they also have kind of this very intimate conversation, Judas and Jesus, and we can't hear what he's saying. And then Jesus also kind of reaches out to Judas at a few points. So I'm not exactly sure how to analyze that. Sure. It's kind of these big questions, but really interesting staging for both, I think.
Yeah, I think between the two, you could see a lot of difference from the two Judases and the staging. So right off the top, 1973 starts with Judas coming in riding on a cross, which is an interesting thing because Jesus has not died yet in the story. But there's a bit of an interesting question. Can Judas be redeemed by the cross? Is that his way in? A bit of a question we could immediately take from that, at least that dramatizing of it. Because then the 1973 has him all in white, surrounded by 1960s, 70s angels, scantily clad in boas and that sort of thing. But there's sort of this image of him transcendent, even looking down on Jesus. It's a whole other thing. I don't quite know what to say about that yet. But then you look at the 2000 version, and he's walking beside Jesus, and instead of white, he's dressed in red. When I first watched it, I thought red is the symbol of martyrdom. As I watched more, I began to think that it actually is more about him being in hell. The angels, they still have white wings, but they're all in black, other than those white wings. He is actively participating in the torture of Jesus. And as the song goes on, he actually pulls further and further away from Jesus, and actually his humanity seems to be breaking down. Until that final moment when Jesus is reaching out, and it seems like in Jesus's eyes, he's asking as a friend, come to me. But what is the look on Judas's face? Disgust, as he turns away and then gets wrapped up in vice. He immediately starts feeling up women and dancing, and even some of his movements are really like staccato, unnatural. They give you sort of the sense that something's happening to him. Very different examples of Judas. And very different versions of what is being played out too. Because he sort of lives out this is what I would have done with your death. He makes a music video out of it. And he gets all these directors in, and they're torturing Jesus as well through all of it. It's that whole, if you were in what I wanted, it would have been mass communications. We would have tortured you even more. We would have seen it up close and personal.
On CNN.
On CNN.
Fox.
Yeah. There would have been dancers alongside of me. Just so, sort of puts a big question on that, his question. But you see how many questions come up in this song. he's saying all of this stuff that Jesus doesn't have, no plan, no understanding, no control, wrong time, wrong place, wrong method. But he keeps asking, I only want to know. I only want to know. But then he can't see. He says it in the middle of it. This became a record breaker. Even he, in his pragmatist perspective, can see that something happened here. He doesn't see a plan. He doesn't see all of this stuff. And yet it was way more impactful than anything else. So it immediately puts a question to his question and his own perspective on it.
Well, it's also, he's asking all these questions and really the answer is in front of him, but he just still will not receive it. And I think that's also kind of interesting that he makes this huge song about it. But, something we, I guess, can really relate to that. So the answer is right in front of our faces, but we kind of find all these different ways to somehow not accept it. So I think that's really quite interesting that he's doing this, but it's just more a matter he's sort of can't come to terms with who Jesus was.
Which that repeated line then has added significance. Don't you get me wrong. And he just repeats that again and again and again, which kind of presents, okay, are you getting it wrong? Okay. Anyway, we're going to move on to Mary Magdalene now, I think, unless you have anything that you want to mention. Mary Magdalene even has less about her really in scriptures. There actually is a bit of a weird history with Mary Magdalene that Gregory the Great once conflated all of the Marys in the Bible other than Mother Mary and turned them into one person. And so, Mary and Martha and Lazarus, that was the same Mary. The Mary that anointed Jesus was Mary Magdalene. Kind of ignoring that there was three Marys at the tomb, ignoring stuff like that, but conflating all of this into one. And so through history, people have seen Mary as a lot of different things. One of the things they've seen her as is a prostitute, which there actually isn't a Mary that is a prostitute or even a sinful woman. There's a weird conflating of two different anointing stories. In the Gospel of Luke, someone anoints Jesus with her tears, and that's seen as a sinful woman. That happens very early in the Gospel of Luke. And then just as Jesus goes towards his death, there's anointing with oil, which is in one of the Gospels recognized as a Mary. Not necessarily Mary Magdalene, but a Mary. And so those two have been conflated, and it doesn't even say she's a prostitute, just a sinful woman. So what that means is another thing, but it's not even Mary, not even a Mary. So it's a bit of a question, but that's one of the things that sort of, I think Tim brought into it is he wants to bring up the drama, he wants to bring up the questioning, and some of it is actually, which we won't have time to get into, some of it is good questions. When Judas challenges him and says, this doesn't fit with your image. Jesus did a lot of things that didn't fit with his image, dining with them, but he does them.
Sorry,
anyway.
maybe we should make it clear that in the musical, they sort of present Mary Magdalene as a redeemed prostitute.
Yes, thank you.
And so by associating with her, Judas says that you're ruining your image by, letting this woman touch you and anoint your, what does she do?
Hair.
Oh, she dabs his face in the hair with a wet cloth.
Yeah.
And Judas says, you shouldn't be doing this because this woman, has a shady past, and so you're ruining your reputation. Sort of like also, once again, bringing this idea of Judas wanting Jesus to be a politician.
Yeah. Just quickly, the parts where we actually see Mary is we see her at the cross, we see her caring for Jesus' body, and we see her at the empty tomb. Mark has a very little bit, which is dated much later, where she was healed by 7 demons. That's a whole nother story. Won't get into that. But those are the 3 times we get Mary Magdalene. So not a lot to go on, except that she cared about Jesus very strongly. And especially that moment where he says, Mary, and she says, Rabbi, there's obviously this close and intimacy that is already there. But we'll see a bit of that intimacy coming up. So can we play Don't Know How to Love Him?